Hello and welcome to the second day of Sustainable Development Week here in Oulu. We are now at the beautiful Science Garden of the University of Oulu, and you are following a panel discussion titled Covid-19, Sustainable Opportunities and Challenges for Higher Education. As we all know, around 7 months ago, the world stopped moving. An invisible enemy conquered planet Earth one continent at a time and forced the nations, societies, and people of the world on their knees. And the long road to recovery is still far ahead of us. Described as one of the worst pandemics of modern times, COVID-19 has not only put many in lockdown, but also forced us to rethink our daily lives, bringing forth both challenges, but also opportunities. In this panel, we will be discussing the sustainable opportunities and challenges COVID-19 brings for higher education. We'll get to hear thoughts and insights from expert panelists on themes like health and well-being, how has the university community managed with organizing teaching and research in the time of social distancing, how has COVID-19 pandemic affected exchange students' life, and how we can change our lifestyles to a more sustainable direction after the experiences we've had during the pandemic. My name is Simo Kekäläinen. I come from the Unit of Strategy and Science Policy at the University of Oulu, and I am one of the hosts of this panel.
Thank you, and I'm the second host of the panel. I'm Jarkko. I currently serve as the second vice president of the executive board of the Student Union of the University of Oulu, also a fifth-year student of education. Let's take a short look at our amazing panelists that have managed to come present in here today. Participating from the distance, we have Anni Kallio, Program Manager of Erasmus Plus Global Mobility Program from the Finnish National Agency for Education. Present here in the studio, we have three people from our very own university. Starting from this end, we have Jouni Jaakkola, Professor of Public Health and Director of the Center for Environmental and Respiratory Health at the University of Oulu. Sitting next to him, we have Professor Elina Lehtomäki, Professor of Global Education from Faculty of Education, as well as the Chair of the Board for Sustainable Development at the University of Oulu. Speaking on behalf of the students, we have student of Ecology and Population Genetics at the University of Oulu, Clement Massi. Welcome and thank you all for coming here today. As a start, we could also explain our routine, open up a little for our audience. If you have any questions for the whole time for any of our panelists, you can write in the chat box your question, who would you like to answer to the question, or if you want to hear the point of view of all of the panelists, you can do that as well. And if we have time at the end of the conversation, we might actually take up some of those questions.
Thank you, Jarkko. I think our panelists are itching to get talking, so I think this warmer question is for all of you. Jarkko already shortly introduced who you are, where you come from, but I would like to ask you all, can you tell us more about who you are, where you come from, how your studies and work are related to higher education, and possibly to the sustainable development theme we have on this week? And the stage is yours. Anyone can start.
I may start as the chair of the Sustainable Development Working Group of the university. We have a working group which I'm very proud of, because we represent different faculties and institutions within the university, and also include student representatives in the working group. And our perspective in the working group is that sustainable development concerns all of us. So that means the entire university community, and in addition to that, also our collaboration partners. So I'm very proud of the working group and happy that we do have such a thing. But we also have what we call advisory board, which is inviting everybody, whoever within the community, to join us. And in the working group, we try to see to that we don't only talk, we also walk the talk. So we do also enact on what we discuss and decide, and try to meet the leadership as well as the faculties and and students and inform what we think is important at the moment. And this Sustainable Development Week was one of the initiatives that was initiated by the advisory board and the working group in collaboration. So that's one issue. And of course, I'm interested in responsibility, and that is sustainable goal number 4, which is about responsibility. 4.7.4 talks about education, defines the goals and targets for education. And I do follow up the global discussion on this issue, but my main interest is 4.7, which really emphasizes that we all need to educate our next generations and ourselves also to take responsibility for sustainability. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Everybody's needed. And it's our role in education systems to take care that we bear the responsibility well.
Thank you, Elena. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this most exciting discussion of the hottest topic on the universities that I can imagine at the moment. So my background is in medicine, and I have also studied epidemiology and biostatistics. And I started as a professor of public health in this university in 2008. And in my inaugural lecture, I promised that I will focus the rest of my career on issues related to climate change and health, and explaining that it is really the biggest health issue of the century. And it raised some eyebrows at that time, I noticed, but this promise has become easier and easier over the years. And now I notice that it's really at the core of many issues. And I have been able to establish a research center and a research program on global change, environment, and public health, where of course it's closely linked to issues of sustainability. And we also have a World Health Organization collaborating center on the same theme hosted by us, and that gives us good connections and interactions with the world. So I have also participated in several European Union and WHO committees on the topic, and increasingly so over the past couple of years. And I'm a member of the National Climate Change Panel as well as Sustainability Panel in this country, and that also has brought a lot of issues related to sustainability. And as Elina said, so we are working together also in the university committees on sustainable development.
Thank you. Wonderful to have you here. We promise to raise some eyebrows throughout the discussion today. And last but not definitely least, Clément, bienvenue.
Merci. Thank you. So I'm Clément Massé. I'm a biology student at the university right now, international student doing my master degree here. I live in Finland since a few years now. My background, I've been working as a wilderness guide, so in tourism in Lapland, and maybe not the most sustainable industry in Finland. So then I switched to education about the Arctic and on biology topic regarding the Arctic at the University of Lapland, and now doing my degree here, focusing on nature conservation mostly. So that's all my interests, and try to be involved in the life of the university. I'm also deputy member of the student council of the student union. So I hope to be able to make the voice of the student heard today too.
C'est un plaisir de t'avoir ici. Thank you.
Okay, so we could start opening up a little the actual urgent topics of our today's discussion, background on what we are about to drill ourselves into. The first questions of today are directed to Professor Lehtomäki. Sustainable development is usually being defined as the United Nations put it, is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Professor Lehtomäki, would you tell us more precisely what does sustainable development mean in practice?
Yes, that's a challenging question. I would say the entire global community has come together to discuss what does it mean, what is the action program, what is Agenda 2030. And defining 17 goals might have been easier in 2015, but then enacting on them has required all governments, all organizations, and in higher education institutions, as we are now at the University of Oulu, we bear the responsibility as a higher education institution, leading the way, showing the way, collaborating across sectors. And we certainly work in the field of education, in the field of higher education. And that is why such programs as Erasmus Plus, for instance, as we heard from the National Agency of Education, I think these are important tools for us to bear the responsibility. Agenda 2030 defines actions that we are to do. And these actions and goals are not well enough known in our society. And that is where the role of higher education comes into place. And when we look at sustainable development, the essential issue there is that we talk about sustainable life skills, we talk about sustainability, we talk about ecosystem, and we have to address issues as interaction between 17 goals. And the most recent report on global development, that was an independent report by researchers around the world. Finland was represented by Eva Furman, who's been the chair of the Sustainable Development Committee for the government. And she represents natural sciences, yet she collaborated in this interdisciplinary working group where they looked at how do these different interactions take place. And this is something where we need to focus on now. It is easier to talk about climate change alone, but if you combine that with education, health, etc., then things get a little bit more complex. But essentially, sustainability is an interdisciplinary topic and requires us to look at things across different fields, disciplines, and partners.
Yes, the whole big picture as a
yes.
disciplinary, yes.
And it's about the systemic approach, so that sustainability is also shared through communication. And that's what we're actually doing now.
Great to hear. The second question and the second half of the conversation regards not so nice issue, but definitely equally important to discuss about, that is the COVID-19 epidemic. And this question is directed to Professor Jaakkola. What is the coronavirus exactly, and why is it so dangerous? Why should we be concerned?
Okay, so first of all, it definitely links to issues of sustainability that we can come back to later. But coronavirus causes a serious respiratory infection. And this is also reflected in its official name, severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus number 2, because the first one, epidemic took place in 2003, starting from Far East, and we already thought that it would cause a pandemic, but it came 17 years later. So there are 3 main reasons why it is so dangerous. First of all, the respiratory disease caused by this virus called COVID can be very severe and cause even death. So in the worst scenarios, the fatality rate can be very high. And so it is really life-threatening as well as probably also influencing the long-term health of people. So the second reason is that it is transmitted from person to person through droplets and from the surfaces, but also potentially from aerosols, which will make it even more difficult to stop. And finally, it may be very difficult to get rid of it, to eradicate this virus. And even though there will be development of vaccination, the broader question of pandemics is not resolved. So coronavirus is zoonotic, meaning that they transfer from animals to human beings through different routes. And so the bad news is that there are thousands of zoonotic viruses already known in the animals. So the same mechanism is likely to take place also in the future. So actually it raises the question of the root causes of this type of pandemics. That we have learned a lot, but we don't know enough yet. But in order to prevent this type of pandemics, we have to get into the roots of these pandemics.
One of the things that has been very much affected by the pandemic is, of course, student mobility. And now I would like to bring our fourth panelist, joining us from the Finnish National Agency for Education, Anni Kallio, to the picture. And Anni, before I present you the question about how pandemic has affected student mobility from Erasmus Plus point of view, could you briefly introduce yourself to our viewers? Hopefully you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you, and it's my pleasure really to take part in this panel. Of course, I'm sorry that I cannot be there present in Oulu. At these times, would be very exotic to travel as far as Oulu from my home office here in Vantaa. But now I have to participate from here. Yes, I work at the Finnish National Agency for Education, Opetushallitus, might be more familiar to many listeners. And I'm in charge of Erasmus Plus program for higher education. And practically all my working life, I've been involved with international mobility of students past 20 years now practically. And although my background, I have an education of a history teacher, but this is what happens in working life. So yeah, so now past 13 years I have worked at the national agency, and before that I used to work at the University of Applied Sciences, Haaga-Helia at the moment. Yes, and that's
okay. Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too, and wonderful to have you here. So as we established, you work as a program manager for Erasmus Plus Global Mobility Program. And, I think it's quite self-evident, but from your point of view, how has COVID-19 affected student mobility in Europe and around the world?
Well, yes, of course. Well, the effect was very great indeed. So in February, March, when all this pandemic started and a large scale, the pandemic started to affect all mobilities of students and staff. First, the impact came with the mobilities with Asian countries, but very soon it affected the mobilities worldwide. And due to the pandemic, student mobilities were either cancelled or interrupted to a large extent. But actually, in higher education, to a bit of a surprise, maybe, also a large share of students could actually continue their mobility despite the pandemic going on. So maybe some 30 or even 40% of students still decided to stay in their host country despite the pandemic, and even those that returned to home country could finish their studies online from home, or at least a part of these students. So actually, it was amazing to see how rapidly the higher education institutions in many countries could switch to online teaching, and how this made the effect of the pandemic much smaller for the higher education communities, and the whole semester was not lost at all, which might have been the case earlier when the digital level was not at the what we have today.
So as you said, even though everything didn't come to a complete standstill, but there is still very big changes in the environment. So what is the situation with Erasmus Plus program in general right now?
Well, in general, of course, the pandemic still affects the Erasmus program very much. For this autumn semester, only maybe maybe 1/3 of the mobilities that were planned can take place for higher education, or even less. This varies a little bit from country to country. Here in Finland, it seems that, well, as we know that the epidemic situation in Finland was not very bad in the summer, or it was actually very peaceful, if we can say so. So because of this, Finland could receive this autumn quite many international students despite the pandemic. So the students felt that it was safe to come to Finland, and also the Finnish universities could organize online teaching and online orientation for international students. But this is not the same case in every country, so that is why from Finland there are much less outgoing students than incoming. So depending, of course, on the host country, what is the situation there, and what are the travel restrictions, and whether the students can actually go. And if we think about the whole Erasmus program at large, then of course this pandemic has caused a lot of different kind of challenges for the use of funds, for example, because Erasmus program funds both mobility and cooperation projects within Europe and also worldwide. And now, as we know that not many mobilities can take place, and also cooperation projects are affected. So this means that a part of the EU funding that was directed to these projects cannot be used at the moment, and this is why the European Commission decided to launch an additional application round for strategic partnership projects. And actually the deadline for this application round will be end of October, 29th of October. And this call is focused on digital education, how to support projects on digital education. So a direct response to the situation caused by the COVID-19. And at least what we are seeing at the moment, that in Finland there is a high interest towards this funding. So we are hopeful to see the many applications end of the month.
We'll be talking about those projects and the digital future of education later on in the panel. But since we're talking about students, I would like to bring in Clément right now and ask, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your life and your friends' life, students' life in general right now? What has happened?
Oh, well, quite a lot. I could speak about my personal experience was actually quite okay, positive, but I would like to speak for most of the students. So I based more my answer on the survey that was made by OYY, the student union, that did a really great job in making a survey on the opinion and the overall feeling from the students. So students felt that overall it was the pandemic situation led to an increased source of stress and workload. It was really dependent on the faculty and on personalities, of course, but overall quite negative trend in this situation. As all the lecture moved online, I think teachers were quite good at handling the Zoom tools and the online tools, so that was a really positive point. But when you look at a lecture with just a teacher in a small window, it's sort of less engaging, maybe. And as student, then we spend our lecture in front of our computer, then we do some task in front of our computer, exercise and rehearsal on our computer, so less interaction. Also, the workload increased. There was a shift from just lecture and then maybe a middle and a final exam to more like weekly tasks, and that increased the workload. Sometimes those tasks were not really well calibrated in the amount of work that was given to students. Teacher might felt that, okay, you are at home, so you can work a bit more, we give you a bit extra task. And with those weekly deadlines, it was more stressful. Speaking as a biology student, we lost also a bit of face-to-face teaching, lab work and field work, which are very important environment of learning. Also, we learn like practical techniques, and it's a really good learning environment that we have lost so far. Maybe a good point was the language courses. A lot of tools were possible to use with online, with the breakout rooms on Zooms. And other positive points were the guest lectures. We had some seminar, for example, then you can invite a teacher from Switzerland that can easily give a 2-hour speech. So that was really interesting. And in the everyday life, students had overall less social relations, increased feeling of isolation as well, because you would sleep, eat, work, and study at the same place in your student apartment. So that can be really, really hard. You spoke about international students and newcomers also, someone moving out from Helsinki coming to Oulu. There was not that much student events, integration events to know the student societies. So harder integration, and to a population of students that is already quite sensitive to mental health problem, that can be like a quite negative factor, the pandemic situation.
Very insightful survey OIR has conducted. I think we can pick up 2 subjects from there, because we have experts from well-being side and the education and teaching side. So we can pick up on those points from the discussion. And maybe, Joni, if I pose a question for you. So we're not only talking about how COVID-19 affects people's health, but basically what Clément was saying, there's increased well-being issues and other things over there. So how has the pandemic actually affected the higher education community from the well-being perspective?
Okay, so definitely the health effects are something of great concern, and not just for those who get the disease, but the worry and the fear of getting COVID may influence well-being and eventually even health. So the main impact of COVID-19 definitely comes from the fact that we have attempts to limit or eradicate the actual disease, leading to isolation, social distancing, and other types of infection control. And so the effects of this type of situation can be quite different, and some of them will manifestate later on. And also, I think what is important to notice that different people are likely to react differently. So there are those who seem to be negatively affected by the isolation, but then there are other personalities who actually seem to be more capable of communicating in the new ways. So it's quite interesting. But but if we think what happened in the spring, so the ultimate was really the closure of the universities, and that was quite dramatic, and nobody knew in advance what would happen, and it was definitely stressful for both the students and the teachers. From teacher perspective, we also got a huge task to somehow compensate these ordinary types of teaching. But as Clément said, we had the experience that it went quite well, although there was a high workload, but then it seemed to work. But if we then go back to the problems of well-being, so some of the isolation may lead to alienation from the community and society. Some stress effects may even trigger some more serious psychiatric disorders, and there are signs of those, and even self-destructive behavior because of the lack of support from the community that we usually benefit from. And then furthermore, in my expectations, so some of the long-term effects, we don't really know about them. They will manifest later on, both concerning the health but also well-being. So we are, in a way, we are learning all the time about the effects, and the novelty of the situation is quite, let's say, typical.
Exactly. So we are in the adaptation stage. This is a huge human and society test.
Yes, this is something quite unusual. It has happened, of course, this is not the first epidemic or first pandemic, but anyway, so it's more historical phenomenon than, for example, medical that of social sciences.
Indeed, indeed.
Mm.
I would like to change the subject to Elina then. So we're talking about health and well-being, but how has university community coped with organizing teaching and research in this time of social distancing? You must have some very first-hand experience from it.
Yes, I can certainly talk about my own experience, but also, as you know, university has followed up also how things have gone, and it was quite amazing to see that over 80% of the teaching just went rapidly online within 1 week, more or less, and I think that was quite amazing. And as Joni said, both students and teachers have felt the stress. And I agree with Joni, most likely some signs and of the stress will only appear later on, because I think it was like a very rapid move. So people did not really have time to think about that we had to adapt. And if we then combine this to some signs and issues of anxiety, climate anxiety as well, on top of COVID and all kinds of things. So we are like, as some researchers say, we are like preparing ourselves how we handle a global crisis. Previously, there's been pandemics and stuff, but this seems to be more global and we get more knowledge all the time. So there's also, as we know, there's more information around students and stuff as well. And I think that can cause also this information anxiety and then increase the stress among everybody. And then when we think about also interaction online interaction is always different from what we have in face-to-face teaching situation, which is very much on interaction. And I think I do react to my students sort of even non-verbal interaction. And then when I don't have that challenge, it's much more different, as Clement says. Also, when you do it online and you only follow small screens and you have sometimes 50 people online, you can't follow up what happens there and how do people react. And even though we try to do it more interactive, and I think university staff, we have learned a lot, much more about using digital tools, virtual pedagogy and issues like that. And we have experimented different international programs, and I would claim that we have the opportunity to become more global in a way. We can reach people around the world, as Clement said. We can have lecturers from around the world, and I've been lecturing to colleagues programs abroad as well. So we've had this sort of more collaboration in a way. We have become more global than what we have been, maybe, because we have the tools and we can do that. While at the same time, we maybe fail to be present as much as we could be when it is face-to-face interaction. And I hear that from my students as well, that there is stress and we need to think, very carefully, what are the tasks, what are the learning assignments, how do we support learning well, and what is good pedagogy when we do it more or less totally online. It is a very different issue. We do have research on, certainly, on digital pedagogy, even within our university. We do follow students' learning. We have the data on what happens in students' learning paths in their educational careers. Yet, I think we lack this face-to-face interaction, which is essential in interaction, and checking that we share the meanings as we aim to. And that is what I'm missing as well. And I'm sure my colleagues and students as well.
Has this new way of working actually had any impact on sustainable development?
Well, that's an interesting issue because, as I said, we have the opportunity to become more global, while at the same time, we may miss some opportunities. And essentially, if you look at them from sustainable development, we certainly travel less. There's clear evidence that, working travel has gone down, not totally, but more or less. So, and so certainly that affects the environment around us. And that certainly has effect on climate, and which is good on one hand, while at the same time, the effect has been not as significant as we expected, because we still consume as much as we do, or even more. And we have different forms of our daily living now. But in terms of sustainability, it means also that we have to reconsider very carefully how much we travel and how much travel is needed and how much we can work virtually and how much we really need to do it by traveling. And I think this is only one aspect. Another thing is then how do we produce the energy that we need for our tools, our materials? These also challenge sustainability.
Thank you. And first of all, I would like to, on behalf of the student union, I would like to thank on the feedback we've got for our survey, and we put some work into it. And thank you for the university of sharing it and all the collaboration we've had with it. Personally, I share many of the experiences Clement brought up in here, but we have now used some time on discussing the overall effects of the pandemic, but we could move on a little discussing the effects of the pandemic from a sustainability point of view. And Professor Lehtomäki could actually continue from here. What kinds of risks does it pose to the global community when borders are being closed because of the coronavirus?
Yes, when we closed the borders, as our colleague from the National Agency for Education said also, yes, it affected certainly the students are less motivated and have less opportunities also to travel abroad for exchange periods of time. And at the same time, we have received less students, international students here when it comes to mobility. And then yet we have tried to work online as much as possible. But then if you look at the global perspective, this also increases what we call digital divide. And digital divide is certainly existing. It's been there already before COVID. And now we may also create sort of pockets of exclusion, pockets of inclusion. So it's easier for us here in Europe or easier here in Finland to use our technology. We have the interfaces, we have the internet connections, so we can easily offer the opportunities for learning. This is not the same case in countries where there's less sort of internet options, when there's less or poorer connections, and when we don't have the equipment in place. And so we may see that also while mobility changes, also participation in learning changes. And we do know that when our students drop out from education, it is more difficult to get back. And that's why I think we really have to bear responsibility also looking at, I think good things are to be shared. And we do enjoy this, what we call common global good here. We have education and we have the technology, but this is not globally the situation. And then if you look at student mobility is only one aspect, another aspect is certainly learning and enabling learning. That is relevant.
To be able to bring it to people via other means. Yes, that's great. The next question we could direct again to Anni Kallio. What kinds of changes have you seen in students' international mobility when it comes to sustainable development, or to put it more precisely, do you feel like students consider going on exchange more carefully when looking at it from a sustainable point of view regarding carbon emissions and flying, for example? Now we are unable to go anywhere even if we wanted, but do you think there could be a longer term and a more permanent kind of change in the future?
Well, this is a very good question. And actually what we have experienced here in Finland the past couple of years is a decline in the numbers of outgoing exchange students. Actually past 3 years, the number of outgoing students has declined by 25%, which is quite remarkable. And now we have tried to find out the reasons for this decline. And when doing so, we haven't really discovered the sustainability and the climate impacts to be one of the main explanations. At least this is not something that we would have discovered talking with colleagues at the higher education institutions and talking with student unions. So for one thing, that as when we talk about the higher education student mobility, the mobility period in average is rather long, in average 5 months, because usually it's either one semester or one academic year. So maybe like traveling for a longer stay in the host country is not considered so harmful for the environment than, for example, flying for weekend trips every so often. That also seems to be the habit of, or used to be the habit of some people before the pandemic. But of course, we understand that this might be one of the issues, and this definitely is one of the issues that will be considered in the new Erasmus Plus program also, and taking the environmental impact very seriously. So, and this is also something that we need to look into in detail more carefully, and really find out how the students view the environmental impact.
Yes, Elina here brought up that we are these days, at least in Finland, we are more capable of delivering like distance learning and making the education available despite the place. Do you think this could challenge the mobility, like in physical terms, by actually traveling to the country in the future?
Well, yeah, this is interesting. Well, what we have noticed during the pandemic actually is that there are different stakeholders that now very strongly advocate for the physical mobility period. For example, student organizations emphasize the importance of physically going abroad and meeting the fellow students and making contacts and really experiencing and living the international experience. And it seems that this doesn't seem to be something that can be easily replaced by virtual mobility, whatever we want to call it. But of course, it brings some additional means of inquiring international experience, definitely. And as we know that for every person and for every student, it is not maybe due to different factors, not so easy or even possible to go out for a longer mobility. So definitely these virtual alternatives might bring some possibility to gain international experience.
Okay, great to hear. We could continue on a little more about the student experience on the current matters. Clement, does this exceptional time, has it had any positive effects on students' lives? We have like discussed shortly on how for some people it could have done that, but how exactly? Has there been any like plus sides for you, your friends, or student point of view?
Yeah, there was some from personal experience during the lockdown, for example. It was during the studying period before the exam, so I had more time to cook myself, for example, to discover new products and vegetables, and to learn new way of cooking vegetarian dishes, for example. So concrete example of sustainability choice. But I think, yeah, overall, when we speak about mobility, for example, there is also for the students less student jobs, so it means less money. So if it's a question about sustainable choice, I feel that sometimes because of the pandemic, students might have less choice. So it's still hard to reach sustainable goals when you have like less mean of economical means. So a bit increased poverty and inequalities as well. On the other hand, it might reduce carbon emission, but it is still complicated when you have a student budget to plane. Unfortunately, kerosene is still really cheap, so it's often the cheaper option, while taking the train to a long distance might be really complicated, even though it would be better. So yeah, I hope we will get there, but from a student perspective, it might still be difficult. Yeah.
Yes. We could also discuss a little about the potential solutions for the current situation. The vaccine to the virus is being developed around the world at the moment we speak, and many medicine factories are already manufacturing the vaccine, although it seems to be unclear whether it will ever be available. Professor Jaakkola, how do you see the creation and introduction of the vaccine from a sustainability point of view? Are we having a solution?
Okay, so there will definitely be a vaccine, and there will be several vaccines against COVID-19, meaning that it will help to deal with this particular virus. But as I said previously, so the root causes of pandemics will remain in spite of having a vaccination and solving this acute global problem. So actually what is needed is something else. And I see great potential in this global crisis from many perspectives and from the perspective of sustainable development. First of all, I think there is a potential for a revolution in the university teaching as to accessibility to education across the world, sharing knowledge, sharing information, democratizing education worldwide. Of course, we need the basics of technology there, and that is not available for a large part of the world. But anyway, so we have a potential for a great step in developing universities. The other link to sustainability is the change in our activities. What they have shown is that we can actually reduce the human burden on the planet. For example, the air pollution levels during the lockdown reduced by 50%, for example, in Beijing or New Delhi. And you could easily see the positive impacts on health already in the short period. Of course, the cost was tremendous, but it shows that this is possible. I think that's another link to sustainable development. And then still, there are various activities that either promote spread of pandemic or restrict it. And now we have to be wise to modify our individual behavior as well as international communication in a way that we optimize our activities, and many of those strongly support sustainable development. And also the crisis has brought out the huge financial support and influence. And if that is directed in appropriate way, that will also strengthen sustainable development. And this is something that is actually taking place within European Union. It's quite clear that this type of discussion, when you spend extra money in support of society, you can do it in a wise way. It's kind of a continuation of the Green Deal that was initiated right before the pandemic started in European Union.
So the pandemic has sort of shown us that we can change when we have to, and we realize that we're forced to do that.
And also we have fast developed tools, for example, for higher education. And now they existed, but now they have put into practice, and it's very difficult to shift it back anymore. Now that the box is open, it's open.
That's yeah, it really makes you think. I would like to direct the next question to Clement. Since you are the student of ecology and population genetics, have your studies made you look at the relationship between sustainable development and the current pandemic from a different perspective, thinking about your expertise?
Yeah, well, indeed, I especially study ecology and nature conservation. So I was very interested, as my fellow panelists say, that there was less pollution, less disturbance. Also, sometimes the traffic has been considerably decreasing, and you could see how fast wildlife in nature could come back to city centers sometimes and could occupy. So it was really good proof of the resilience of nature and this resilience potential nature has. Also, the fact that people stayed at home and often get really bored. So a lot more people looked at their garden, their immediate surrounding without looking to go in exotic destination, but looking for birds, checking what's happening by your window. That's maybe the best Netflix show sometimes. So there was like great interest in that. So I think it is considerable point. But I would be careful also on the carbon emission, because if we take the situation in 2008, during the crisis, indeed the carbon emission dropped, but after the crisis, it increased and went ever higher. So we have to be careful indeed with the Green New Deal, where money put it into the economy and which sector are getting subsidies as well, taking into consideration the potential for ecological transition, not just giving money to every sector, but maybe pinpoint at the one that are doing something for sustainability even more.
Planned and considered acts.
Yes.
One more question on this section of the discussion, and this concerns all of you. You can answer in any order you like. What outcomes of this pandemic do you think will remain as permanent in the future? You might have heard the talk about the new normal. When it comes to sustainable development, what might stay after this? Anyone can start.
Okay, so this is more my wishing list, but I think that first of all, I think attitudes to infection control will change. I think the antibiotics and the possibility to treat the most serious infections created some sort of false security. The pandemic could have been caused also by some resistant microbes. This type of speculations existed aside with viral pandemics. And so I think we just have to accept that infectious diseases have person-to-person transmission. We have to practice certain principles. And also, if we do so, then we don't have to make such dramatic changes in the society when the epidemic gets really bad. So then the other thing which I think will remain, and I was referring to this potential university revolution, is really the digitalization. So we have noticed, we have learned that some things actually work quite well. And also those activities have been now kind of fine-tuned so that people have lost this some sort of a discomfort with technology. Now many people have become more comfortable in using various tools that we have had for a long time. And third, I still think that there has been emphasis on a number of changes in our everyday life that could also strengthen sustainable development. For example, transportation. There has been increased use of bicycles. There has been also more emphasis on the co-benefits of climate change mitigation. So all this has become more transparent and more visible. So I think also, so the infection control, digital revolution, and possibilities of change in our day-to-day lifestyle are some of them will stay definitely.
Any other viewpoints on this, or should we move on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I hope that's. I remember especially that for me it was quite funny that when people consume just what they need because of the lockdown and according to their needs without superficial overconsumption, the economic system crash. So interesting thought that something might be broken, and that we were mentioning the UN goals, that the goal number 8 about economic growth can be a bit questioned on this. And to bounce on the revolution and digitalization of the university, I hope that remember that indeed it gives great globalization opportunity, as you said, but our local scale is also very, very important. This shift, for example, if I take here, we have the luck at the university to have many institutes and many faculties within the same building. So it was really easy to access people, to knock on the door of people, in 5 minutes have a discussion, have access to someone, and be really efficient. And that we've maybe a bit lost it. I think also maybe we should remember that the university is not just a structure delivering knowledge, but should also be a tool for critical thinking, for making us students more like future citizens involved in everyday matters. And if we just have online teaching, I think it restricts a bit the scope of the possibility that the university could offer.
Maybe I could add here as well, because I think this, like as Jouni said, and he also mentioned that our behavior change, we have shown it's possible, and as a collective action as well, not only individual behavior change, but also as a collective. We have been able to change and transform as an organization quite rapidly. So we certainly are capable of doing that. And that's, I think, brings us hope as well. So we can cope with whatever crises are coming. And I hope this really tests our adaptability and capability also to react to climate change and to adapt to mitigate the changes that are coming, because they are coming and we can't totally avoid it. We have to adapt. And this has shown the capacity we do have as an organization, but also as individuals, as a collective. And I think that's very important. And I think what we also have learned, I think through this, is that we can work as a community. And I think what becomes essential is that, as Clement said, we do need also these face-to-face meetings. We need interaction. And if we change our interaction, we can still function. So this again shows the adaptability that we are able to go through. But that also, when it comes to sustainability, we do challenge, yes, the economic growth. It has been one of the goals that has been mostly critiqued also among the 17 goals. There are several issues that we can see how the interaction functions with the other goals. And I think this crisis has really tested that sustainable development goal. What is the growth? How is it possible still in this world? Because we have to take care not only about their ecosystem as a total, but also how human beings then interact with the ecosystem. And we need a sustainable way for that. And this has shown that, yes, we can do quite a lot and we can change our behavior as a global community as well. And I think what it also brings is that we do challenge local global connections. I know that there's been some doubts about, you know, why things could be local, national, global. Where do we put the emphasis? And I think this has really shown us that this interaction is there, this connectedness is there, and we can't doubt about that anymore.
It's possible to work together.
Yes, and at different levels.
So we were also talking, we touched upon this subject, so traveling during the pandemic and interaction. And I just want to highlight the point of traveling in and to Finland and interaction inside the countries. And probably my first question would be directed to Anni, but also Clement. And from the international student perspective, Anni, I would like to ask you first, what are the reasons that international students see Finland as a tempting exchange destination? And when you sort of like, you know, tell your viewpoint from the Erasmus Plus program, I think Clement can then add your own perspective why you chose Finland. But Anni, I'll give the word for you first.
Yes, well, yes, in Erasmus Plus program, we get quite nicely some information on this issue, as every participant of the program need to fill out an online survey where also this aspect is asked. And for what comes to incoming students to Finland, it seems that the country itself, Finland, is the biggest reason for choosing to come to Finland. But then also quite importantly, the study offer of the Finnish host institutions is weighing a lot when students, foreign students, decide to come to Finland. And it seems that this factor is much more important for incoming students to Finland than outgoing students from Finland. So the foreign students really appreciate the study offer of the Finnish host institutions. Then also one valuable issue is the language of study. Of course, as we know, all foreign, or let's say, well, 99.9 maybe % of foreign students study in English. here in Finland, and there is a variety of courses offered in English. Then, of course, also the city and culture are important. But then also what is also emphasized in case of Finland is the excellent services offered by the host universities to incoming students. So the Finnish universities really rank high on this aspect. And then to my surprise, the social life only comes as the sixth most important factor. So this is what we know from the experience of Erasmus Plus program.
Many different factors. Clément, do you agree?
Yeah, partially. Well, if I will be honest with my exchange experience. So I came for the first time in Finland with the Erasmus program in Helsinki for a year, and I wanted to go to Turkey first, and the place was taken. So I ended up in Finland. I was like, well, let's see how it is, and I'm still here 5 years later. So for someone who was not convinced at the first place, then Finland did a great job to make me stay here. So yeah, indeed, I think a lot of people choose Finland because of the Nordic state of mind with the Finnish education system. That everywhere in Western Europe we speak about this as a model, so people want to experience it. I would agree also that the choice of courses in English are quite a good skill. But on the other hand, I'm glad that here there's an event organized in English, but there is still room for improvement. I think that too often the study in English might be given just through book exam to international students, and we take a bit less care of them. So teaching mostly in Finnish, and then a little bit of lecture here and there for the exchange students and for the international students. And in some faculty, it happens still like this. So sadly, there is this happening. I think there is room for improvement, but it's already a good situation, I think.
Yeah, one can always improve. Anni, so just as Clément said, the Finnish education system is known all around the world, but how does the future seem from the Erasmus Plus program point of view right now? What is going to happen with student mobility after the pandemic or during the pandemic? You also mentioned about some programs that Erasmus Plus is actually driving towards, so maybe we could hear something more about them too. What is the future looking like?
Yes, like I already mentioned that, or maybe I didn't mention exactly the fact that, physical mobility will still remain in the core of the new Erasmus program, also in the future. So it is now past 30 years, then the mobility of students and staff of higher education has been financed by Erasmus program in Europe, and this will continue to be so also in the future. But what we can see is that this will be then complemented by blended mobility opportunities. So not completely virtual, maybe, at least not for the majority of students and staff, but blended in a way to make the program more inclusive, to enable also those participants that cannot take part in longer term mobility to do a short mobility, although that might not be so environmentally friendly, and then complement the experience by virtual learning. But one novelty of the new program, or one feature that is now emphasized, is a so-called green Erasmus Plus, which will be gradually put into effect when the new program starts next year. And this so-called green Erasmus involves different lines of action in order to make the environmental impact of the program smaller. And what we know at the moment, although the negotiations are still to be finalized, hopefully by the end of this year, is that that new program will definitely support the use of more environmentally means of travel instead of, for example, flying. And there will be incentives for such green travel, for example, like more travel days for mobile participants and higher grants for green travel. Of course, well, when we think about Finland, it's maybe not so easy to choose the green travel option, or not at least in comparison when we think about countries in Central Europe. But then to a smaller extent, most likely also compensation of carbon emission might be possible if green travel is not an option for some mobilities. We still need to get more details on this issue. But then in general, the aim of the new program will be to increase the environmental awareness among the participants of the program by different educational activities. And also the new program will fund projects with focus on sustainable development. So it will be, I think, taking on board in several ways.
So we heard quite many keywords: sustainability, green travel, and so on. I think this could be a question for all the panelists, because we heard about how COVID, the pandemic, has affected collaboration and so on. But from the sustainability perspective, has this pandemic made different areas inside Finland, outside countries, outside Finland and between different countries more equal from the sustainability point of view? What are your thoughts on that?
If I may start, I would say yes and no, because yes, we certainly can live more sustainable in a more sustainable way, and it has changed our travel schemes, as we heard earlier, and carbon emissions reduced, yes, for a while, but then again increased. So it is like giving us an opportunity to do and revisit sustainability in a very careful way, and then look at our lifestyle. And essentially at the core is the lifestyle, but it's also connected to, certainly, to the environmental issues in a broader scale, and to the economic growth as well. What brings growth and what does not? And then can sustainability be the criteria, as Clement said earlier, and for the support or funding? And I think these are important issues. So I'm very happy to hear that Erasmus Plus really concerns and will introduce Green Deal, and also maybe carbon emission compensation and schemes like that, because I think these are very important issues. And as we do know from the climate activism among young people, our young people are more aware of things around them and more concerned about sustainability. And then it requires us as a higher education institution to also see what is it that we do and how sustainable ways we can function our infrastructures as well. And infrastructures are key in sustainability. And that is what we need to oversee. What are our carbon emissions? How do they change? What is our food waste? How does it change? And these are sort of everyday issues at the level of an organization. And now we've been like more closed in our individual whatever holes at home, working at distance. So this has meant also that it's individuals who bear more responsibility now. And then for the future, I think, yes, it is both yes and no. We may do that, but we may not. And I think in higher education, as well as in higher education cooperation, we really need to see to that we do emphasize it, not only here at home, at our home institution, but also more widely in our partnerships and our core partnerships.
As an effect on a lot of things. Yeah.
So your question was about equality between countries, or?
Between countries, maybe if you compare, let's say, Finland and France. So here in Finland, for example, people have gone out to the nature, and it seems like their lifestyles have been changed. Do you see the same kind of trend happening in France or globally, worldwide?
Well, it's not at all the same situation on the epidemic point of view in France, but I think, well, now we are discussing a lot about within the EU and EU policies, but we have to keep in mind that a lot of international students are also coming out of the EU, and in that matter, it actually brings much more inequalities on the ability to travel and to access Finland. So as you say, if you're in a country where your internet connection is more difficult, you might have just many problems with your visa, with your residence permit, because the embassy are closed, because the embassy is in a neighboring country, extra. So it, I think, brings a lot of inequality. I keep in mind also taking students with families. because of the economical crisis, if you have to work also from home and do remote working, you might not always have a quiet place to work at home and to be focused on your studies. So I think there is inequality in the housing, in the infrastructure for the student perspective. So I wouldn't see it as a major improvement for equality.
Very important point to be raised.
Yes, so I think this pandemic has been some sort of a resilience test for the societies and for the communities, with quite surprising outcomes, because some of the rich societies have coped surprisingly poorly, whereas some of the poorer societies have dealt better with the pandemic. So, but if we think this is a crisis and there has been a lot of changes, and there are those who have gained and those who have lost, and so now the challenge is really to deal with this type of negative effects, and then accept or take advantage of the positive development. For example, the mega trend of urbanization, which has been taking place for decades now and seems to be moving on, has got a small bump in the development. So there seems to be more appreciation of being outside the cities, living in the nature. And I think probably people are also perceiving their future lifestyle a little bit differently. So their desires or wishes of their future life, because this was really a shock for the cities more than anything. So that may also influence the future development. But an unfortunate feature of the effects of pandemic is really that the most vulnerable have also suffered most, and that is something that both we have to react both globally, nationally, and locally. So that is really a challenge, and that there is a potential of increased inequality if we don't deal with some of the problems.
So actions definitely need to be taken.
Definitely, in the new situation. So we, of course, take advantage of the development and benefits, but there will also take place some negative developments that also need to be dealt with in education, in society, in broader terms.
Both sides of the coin will be seen. Anni, did you have any point on this equality question regarding different areas from the Erasmus Plus perspective?
Well, we don't have much fact-based information yet available. And well, of course, what affects the Erasmus Plus program and the situation in every country depends a lot on what is the pandemic situation in the particular country. So if it gets worse, then also the mobility of students and stuff and all international activities are affected more severely. And then also it seems that then it takes time them to recover after the situation improves. And well, of course, in Erasmus Plus program, we also finance cooperation with countries around the world. So not only Erasmus, and with in this so-called global mobility, it seems that the impact was even bigger than within Europe. So almost all mobilities within or with non-European countries have been cancelled. It seems that it is quite impossible to travel from country to country outside Europe, or even if you might be able to travel, you are not able to apply and to get the visa or the residence permit because the embassies are closed, what Clement already mentioned. So in that sense, it already affects the countries differently. And this has also greatly affected the mobility of degree-seeking students, because the students simply have not, for example, they have also the incoming students to Finland have not all been able to enter the country when their study program was supposed to start. So at least this kind of inequality comes to my mind.
Many different factors to be concerned with. We've been talking about for an hour already. The discussion has been flowing, and we promised in the beginning that we can check out if we've had any questions in the chat box, and we've had one, and I'm going to be reading this question. It hasn't been addressed to anyone particularly, but if you feel like this is for you, just go and answer. So Ari Takanen from Kielo Road has asked, should Finland sell carbon footprint compensation, sell forests and lakes to businesses, or create a fund that creates national parks or some other method where polluters can pay to compensate in Finnish nature? What do the panelists think about this question? Clement.
Yeah, I think carbon neutrality and carbon compensation is a great goal to aim at, but we have to be careful with the policy of carbon compensation, how we compensate it, because I know that some company, for example, like airplane company, compensate by planting one type of tree in another third world country, for example, and creating monoculture somewhere else. So definitely not a sustainable solution to it. So yeah, we have to take it into account with the climate change perspective, but the biodiversity loss perspective as well. So I think it's a really tricky question, a bit out of my field, but from what I know about carbon compensation, we have to be very careful about it.
Innovative idea, but with some tricks.
Yes, comment. So yeah, I agree with Clement about that you shouldn't focus only on carbon compensation. And when we think about the Finnish forests, they have a huge potential for reducing greenhouse gases. But I'm more concerned about the biodiversity issues and the nature conservation, because easily the discussion has gone in just the volume of forest, which is a very one-dimensional idea of the nature. But of course, if you could combine nature conservation and carbon commerce, so that at the same time you would protect the old forests and then take that into account in the carbon compensation, then you would gain both aims.
And so there's an idea that you can also work on, Ari, if you feel like, this could be something for me. We've been discussing quite a lot about many different topics, and I think it would be time to sort of like try and tie the loose ends of the discussion into two remaining questions that will be presented to all of our panelists. And maybe we could start with a question that was related to the higher education that we had in the beginning. But so all panelists, do you think the role of higher education has changed during the pandemic, or will it change after the pandemic? And if yes, how so? So now we talk about knowledge and bringing research to the benefit of humankind. Has this changed? What do you think about it?
Well, I think the mode of work and learning has changed dramatically, temporarily more so, but definitely there will be features that will remain. And as I suggested a while ago, so I am really kind of waiting for this type of university revolution which would actually improve the access to higher education. We have the capacity, we have the technology. I think it's now more about political will. And this, I'm talking about this worldwide. So we have all the good universities, we have the good teachers. Now we have the great tools to actually spread the knowledge and promote learning.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it already a bit before, but that's indeed there is really new tools, and it's really great that the way of delivering the knowledge can be done online. The accessibility to some other university, the partnership can be there. But I think it's good, it's fundamental, but it shouldn't be the only role of the university. That shouldn't forget its role also for a student perspective to integration of creating link, of making students involved in the life of the university, in the decision, not just receive knowledge, but really act for it and participate in the life of the university, which might be challenging now.
The core stays the same, but the methods will change. Yes. Elina, Anni?
Yes, Anni, would you like to start and then I'll go?
Well, maybe I'm not sure if I have so much to add. In general, I'm a great believer in education, and in particular in higher education. And I think that, or what I feel is that especially in times of crisis, there might be a need for many people to redirect themselves. Maybe some jobs will be permanently lost due to the pandemic or such impact might be cost. So definitely the need for education will remain even higher than any time else.
Thank you, Anni. Elina?
Yes, what I would like to add is certainly we have seen so much more scientists and researchers in media recently. So I think the emphasis on knowledge and understanding how knowledge is important in times of crisis, I think, is evident. And I think this is something that I think this pandemic has really shown clearly. So as my colleague Joni said, and as Clement said, and Anni as well, so we do have the means, we have the tools, we have the pedagogy, we can use them more efficiently. And science is there. And I think science, one of the tasks for us as a higher education institution is also to bring hope. And I think essentially pedagogy, higher education pedagogy can bring hope. So we do have the possibility to work better, to work well, but also as a community. And as a learning community, we can really make a difference when it comes to sustainability. Sustainability requires, as I said earlier, the entire community to react. And higher education institutions, like we do now here during the Sustainability Week, we are collaborating across Applied Science University, as well as other educational institutions in the field, and then connecting to the national level. So I think we do have this opportunity that we can seize now. We can really exploit it better. And I think for the university, I think from the leadership to the bottom, and we've had this sustainability as a bottom-up approach at this university. We started from really by contacting people who were interested in the topic, and we can show that we can work like this, and we can transform. And I'm not talking about revolution as Joni is, I'm talking about transforming the organization from within. And I think that's what we can do. Whether you call it revolution or transformation, I would prefer transformation because the institution is there. And we do have the means that we can use. And then understanding the information and the need for knowledge and information that Anni mentioned earlier, I think is very important. And also access to knowledge, not only access to education as qualifications, but also to knowledge. And that's something what citizen science can bring us. And we need to collaborate better with the society around us.
A wonderful vision. And there was one word that I want to pick up on as the last question of our panel. You said the word hope. And we want to end up on a positive note in our panel. And this goes to all panelists. We were talking about the opportunities this dire situation can offer for the future. And if we take this to the individual level, in your opinion, how can we all individually can change our lifestyles to a more sustainable direction after the experiences we've had during the pandemic, from your respective perspectives? And anyone can start.
Okay, I can start.
Yes.
I think many of us have made smaller or larger decisions in their own life towards sustainability. And at the same time also, some of these decisions have become easier because also the societal actions have supported this. And I'm talking about transportation, food, communication, and some linked activities. And so I think there is this idea that development brings development. We have started development and it will go on, hopefully. And this is really that we have tried things that many of them were thought impossible or difficult or unpleasant, but actually we have found some new ways of life which possibly are more satisfying and at least more sustainable.
That's a wonderful note. Achieving something we thought was impossible.
Yeah, I can go. I think sobriety and parsimony in our way of living could be a really good thing as individual action. If you have the opportunity to choose your way of consuming, then you can choose what you buy, how you do your housing, how you get your energy, your clothing, your food diet, and you can act as recommended by the International Panel on Climate Change or WWF that have really concrete action there. But I think we maybe don't need much also. We saw with this pandemic that we need mostly human link and link with nature. That's really something that we want and we really, really need. For the rest, I think it's not only on individual that the matter will change, but of course, you were speaking about transformation and revolution. I think it's about to be a revolution because it's quite abrupt transformation, deep systemic change that is needed because deadline for sand biodiversity is there and is near. So individual action will have to be completed by bigger systemic change, I think.
Elina, Anni?
Yes. Or do you, Elina, do you want to?
Well, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, if I think about at the individual level, yeah, at least, well, what has been already mentioned several times, like less long distance travel, maybe more local travel and enjoying and exploring the local environment and nature. I can recommend geocaching for everyone. It's my great hobby, and you can do it next door from your home. Also, like yeah, of course now we see that the work travel has been now cancelled for the period of time, and I would say that it will never get back to the same level that it used to be, because there used to be a lot of quite useless meetings to be traveled to that could easily be organized online. And yeah, so and also when talking about everyday life, of course public transportation is good, but now I notice many people turn to like walking and biking even longer distances, trying to avoid contacts to other people. So maybe this is something that could continue even after the concerns of the pandemic will hopefully fade away.
Thank you, Anni. And Elina?
Yes, I think, as I said earlier, yes, we have done it. We have been able to do this. We've been capable of the change and or transformation or revolution, whatever you call it. But yes, we can do that. And when we think about what happens around in our environment from the sustainability perspective, what sustainability also requires us to do is to work across disciplines, work across fields, work across different sectors within society. And that is what I see, that there's a great opportunity for enhancing this cooperation. Really take it seriously. We do have the opportunity now.
We're in this together. Let's stay together.
Thank you. These are very great points. And I believe that these are the kind of matters we could spend the whole evening discussing, but I'm afraid that our time has come to an end. I would like to thank all of our great panelists for bringing their time and expertise for us here today. We have discussed the COVID-19 COVID-19 in relation to sustainable opportunities and challenges, student mobility, digital learning, the dangers there are, but also the hope and possibilities we would have to tackle these challenges. And I have personally learned a lot during this discussion, so thank you all for that. How are you feeling about this, Simo?
I think the word that really comes up from the discussion was hope and positivity. And I think we could all quote Queen Elizabeth II, who said that better days will return and we will be with our friends and families again, and we will meet again. And I think those words are really linked to this discussion too. So thank you for joining. This was the COVID-19 panel about sustainable opportunities and challenges during Oulu's Sustainability Week. Please check out the remaining events of this week and join them, learn and discuss. We would like to see you all there. Thank you for joining. Stay safe, stay healthy, and till we meet again. Bye-bye.